back to my channel for the final video I'm going to be posting as a top 10 for 2018. This year, while there were some very disappointing and surprising movies, there were a lot of movies that were still really good. And those are the movies I want to highlight here in this video today from my top 10 favorite films of 2018. Now for this video though, I want to mention that there were some movies that I really wanted to watch, but I just couldn't make it to this year. And while other YouTubers may mention this on their channels, I feel that not enough really mention what movies were the ones that they wanted to see. So that's what I'm going to do for you right now. I'm going to list all the ones that I wanted to see really badly for this list, but just couldn't make the time for. And those include At Eternity's Gate, Beautiful Boy, Burning, Colette, The Favorite, Hearts Beat Loud, Juliet Naked, Shirkers, A Simple Favor, The Tale, and Wildlife. Those were all films that I really wanted to see, like I said, but just never made the time for. But in this next year, I'll make sure to catch up with those so that when it comes time for me to wrap up things and talk about my favorite films of the whole entire decade, I will have seen those by then. Additionally, I would like to talk about the honorable mentions for this year because there were a lot of films that I genuinely loved from 2018, but the 10 I'm about to list in alphabetical order, I really enjoyed, but just not enough to make it to my top 10 for this year. And those films would include The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Black Panther, Blind Spotting, 8th Grade, Game Night, Incredibles 2, Isle of Dogs, Lean on Pete, A Quiet Place, and Shoplifters. I would also like to give a very special honorable mention to Roma, directed by Alfonso Cuarón. On occasion, I will see movies that on the first viewing I'm kind of disappointed in because they got so much acclaim from other critics and then I end up not liking it as much for whatever reason. But while that's still kind of the case, like this hasn't jived with me as much as other critics, I still want to mention that this is one of the best visual achievements of the whole entire year. Alfonso Cuarón made a film that absolutely needs to be seen just based on its cinematography, editing, and just the way that he fills everything into the frame is just astounding. For that reason alone, along with the top-notch sound design, I think everyone should see this movie, preferably in the theater if they can, but if not, then of course on Netflix. But otherwise, it doesn't quite make the cut because the story honestly just didn't really impact me as much as I would have liked to. But it's still a film that I think everyone should see. It's very well crafted, it's immaculate, and I think it's an absolutely beautiful film regardless of how you feel about the story. But now getting into the actual list, here at number 10 we're going to start out with what made number 1 on my most surprising list for this year, and that would be Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Honestly, this movie surprised me at every single level. And for quite a while, I thought that films like Isle of Dogs and Incredibles 2, which are amazing in their own right, would make it onto this list. But Spider-Verse earns the title of the animated film to get on my top 10 this year because it does literally everything right in terms of storytelling and animation. And even though animation seems to be the one reason most people are loving this movie, the fact that despite its basic plot, it executes everything really well into something that is just so effective and entertaining and meaningful is why it ends up being at number 10, because it ended up being the best superhero film of this year, and it's also one that I think will have the greatest staying power and influence on the industry. At number 9, we have the first of many documentaries to be mentioned on this list, and that is They Shall Not Grow Old, directed by Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson hasn't made anything great since the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but this is the first one I think that has almost reached that level of artistic and narrative quality. This film could have ridden just on its premise alone of taking 100-year-old footage from World War I, repurposing it with colorization and 3D imagery, and that could have been enough. But that wasn't apparently enough for Peter Jackson because he took that concept and executed it very well in terms of its visual style, but also he did it in such a way that makes the narrative about British soldiers in World War I all the more meaningful, and it brings their stories to life in a way that honestly I've never seen in a movie before, and I think more people should probably appreciate. In an act of trying to recreate history, this film literally does it by taking old archival audio and footage and making it into something that feels like it was filmed yesterday. At number 8, we have yet another documentary, and that would be called Minding the Gap. This film from young director Bing Liu, who is also one of the subjects in this film, is tragic because It follows the lives of three guys who grew up together in Rockford, Illinois, and kind of shows us how, especially in the millennial age, that despite the fact that even if you have a bright future ahead of you, you will make mistakes, and there will be problems that beset you in your life because of the American dream and other things that take you down roads that you might never have expected. And that might not sound like all that appealing to those who prefer an entertainment, but for me, I found so much intimate and emotional value watching this movie, especially because I saw myself through the lives of these three men. Having lived in the Midwest myself for a couple of years, seeing their experiences reflected in this movie so realistically and so truthfully meant so much to me personally, and I think that anyone else who could relate to their situations could find a lot from this movie as well. Along with the fact that it has some gorgeous skateboarding sequences filmed by these guys. Right, at number 7, we have a movie that is absolutely not a documentary, and that is Hereditary. This comes from first-time director Ari Aster, and somehow he was able to make, even on his first feature, a better horror film than 95% of other directors working in Hollywood today. And while I don't consider this movie to be entertaining, I think it's a movie that absolutely should be seen because of its technical prowess, its sound design, and the storytelling. The storytelling and the acting combined together make some of the most frightening, chilling, and just thematically resonant storylines of the whole entire year. Especially coming from Toni Collette, who gives, I think, an Oscar-worthy performance. And I think it's kind of sad that she's being forgotten in award season this year, because the way that she's able to transform all the emotions of her character and transcribe them to the screen is absolutely outstanding. The same goes as well for supporting actor Alex Wolff, who I also think deserves a nomination. Both of these actors gave their all to a story that really asked them to do so much, but because of how much was given from these performers, Ari Aster as a director and then the crew, made a horror film that might be controversial to some, is perhaps one of the most thrilling experiences I've ever had in a theater. At number 6, we have Free Solo, which is, yes, the third documentary I've mentioned on this list, but for a good reason. It follows a hiker named Alex Honnold, who is well known for his free solo climbing of rock faces. And this film details his experiences and all the things that led up to him being the only man in history to successfully climb El Capitan in Yosemite without any sort of harnesses or assistance whatsoever. Now, this movie isn't just thrilling because of the cinematography that you witness as you watch this man literally climb El Capitan with the thought that he might die at any second. But it also is a very ethically challenging film as well, because it goes into the challenges one faces when you have a man who puts so much into his hobby that he puts other things in his life on the line. But it also is so interesting as a documentary too, because you hear so much from the crew about whether or not they even wanted to film Alex doing these things, knowing that any second he could slip and fall to his death and wanted that was caught on camera. But because of how well everything came together in the end, this is one of the most absolutely captivating film-going experiences I've ever had in my life. If there is an opportunity for you to watch this in IMAX while it's still available, take that chance, because not only will you be treated to a very interesting and fascinating story, you'll find that this is one of the most thrilling experiences you could ever have watching on the big screen. At number 5, we have a film that I'm honestly as surprised as you are even made it, which is Paddington 2. Look, don't judge me, okay? Like this movie is just plain fun. Do you remember when movies were just fun? Paddington 2 does what so many family films just can't do, and that is balancing humor that is meant for children and giving them a story that encourages them to be better people, but also makes that appealing towards adults as well, if not even more appealing, because this film is just crafted so well. It almost feels like a Wes Anderson movie in a way, which is kind of ironic because Wes Anderson also released a movie this year, but it didn't make it the list, so take that as you will. But yes, this movie, it kind of has to be seen to believe to how good it is. But between the amazing characters, the great entertainment value that's in it, and everything else that leads up to a message that I think everyone needs to hear, check it out for yourself. Like, you might be surprised as I was watching how great this film actually ended up being. At number 4, we had Annihilation, which is probably the most controversial sci-fi film of the year. And I can understand that. There are a lot of paths that this movie takes that don't end up giving concrete answers to some people's questions. But I actually found that to be one of the film's greatest strengths, aside from just how thrilling, entertaining, and visually amazing it is. Because I love films that leave you on an ambiguous note, but kind of in a satisfying way. It ties up enough of its loose ends to the point where you can feel satisfied knowing that you watched a story go from point A to point B, and the conflict is resolved. But then the open-ended questions leave you wondering things about who you are as a person, questioning the world around you, and how that might impact our society. Annihilation is very relevant in that regard, and it joins the ranks of films like 2001: A Space Odyssey as being one that challenges its audience as much as it entertains them as well. At number 3, we have what is, I promise, to be the last documentary to be mentioned here, and that is Won't You Be My Neighbor. Like Paddington 2, this film has a message that just cannot be ignored, because our society is filled with so much hate and vitriol that to have a movie that is just so pleasing and nice and encourages people to be that way in their own lives as well is, I think, it's very relevant to today. But this movie doesn't just get its value because it has a strong message. Like, it's incredibly entertaining, and also learning so much about Fred Rogers and his life, not just through his TV show, but behind the scenes as well, is perhaps just one of the most entertaining and emotionally resonant experiences I've had in a movie, perhaps ever. Having grown up with this show, this was very meaningful for me to not only see how his show came into being, but also how much that meant to his family life as well, and to the people who he impacted. That was very enlightening to me, and it also made for an experience that I deeply appreciate. Even if you've never seen Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I would encourage you and many others to watch this movie because of its entertainment value, but also because it'll lead you to be a better person. It truly will. Because, to be quite frank, Mr. Rogers is probably the closest anyone's probably ever gotten to being like Jesus in terms of just being kind-hearted and looking out for others. And the example that is set forth through his work and also exemplified by this movie is something that everyone should take in and appreciate. With number 2, we have perhaps the best blockbuster in the past 5 years, and that was Mission Impossible Fallout. Look, the Mission Impossible series has had, kind of a similar story going on for the past several movies or so, but Fallout gets so high on this list because out of all the films in the whole entire Mission Impossible series, this one has executed its story the absolute best way possible. With practical camera work, a stunt team that was so incredibly daring that they put forth action scenes that are gripping and intense and actually look real, because they actually are. And it all leads up to an entertaining experience that, while it may be long, it is never boring in any way, because it just keeps moving from one scene to the next, and it keeps you engaged consistently as you see a ton of amazing locales, gripping action scenes, and a story that is actually surprisingly emotionally resonant too. I'm very pleased with in terms of its storytelling, because it actually incorporates events from previous films, culminates it here, and provides some interesting development for characters that wasn't seen as much in previous installments. So anyone who is invested in previous Mission Impossible films like I was will be satisfied with how much this pushes the envelope for action filmmaking in general, but also ends up caring enough about its story to keep it going too. And with that, I'm actually really excited for Christopher McQuarrie, the director, to return for the next 2 movies, because if he keeps pushing Tom Cruise and his crew to do better and better each time, it's honestly unfathomable to know what's coming up next. Okay guys, here we are at number 1. A film that, when I talk about it, may not seem all that appealing at all to you, which I would completely understand. I know that a good portion of my audience probably wouldn't want to watch this, but for me, it just had such a deep, lasting impact on my soul that it's encouraged me to develop a greater relationship with God and to try to understand Him more, and also about how to be a better steward to the people around me and the world as well. And that would be First Reformed. Now, the reason I say this probably won't appeal to as many people watching my videos is because it is just so incredibly dark. And I don't mean that in the sense that there's a lot of violence and sex or language. There's almost none of any of those things. But because its mood gives you a sense that the main character of this film, portrayed so beautifully by Ethan Hawke, he deserves an Oscar for what he does it really gives you the sense that this main character is wrapped up in so much trauma and introspection and worry for the world around him that it makes you question the very fabric of your own soul. It also makes you wonder how God thinks about us in our own lives. And it does so in perhaps the best way possible by not giving true concrete answers to anything, but giving you enough to think about to where when the story reaches its inevitable conclusion, which is incredibly suspenseful by the way, it just has a lasting impact on you. And in terms of its storytelling, that's probably what I look for the most. A film that not only feels satisfying in the moment, but sticks with you. And also because its main characters develop to the point where I almost saw myself through them. In addition, this film cannot be ignored simply because it's a masterclass in filmmaking. And even though it's shot in a 4:3 frame in the same aspect ratio as most old televisions, Schrader, the director, he did his best to fill everything in the frame so that everything you see is completely focused in on your attention. It enables you to completely be wrapped up in the experience in the moment, and then its shots help you understand more about how characters are feeling, how we should probably think about their situation, and does everything right that visual storytelling should do in tangent with narrative storytelling. So I don't know, perhaps this movie won't be your cup of tea, but because of how everything came together in the end, that is why I find it to be the best film of 2018. Performances, storytelling, direction, literally everything that this movie could ever do to be successful, it does. And for me, it'll have the most lasting impact out of any movie I saw this year. So guys, that is my top 10 for 2018. Thank you so much for watching this video. And I look forward to keep on producing more content for 2019 as well. I look forward to a review of Glass coming soon. And I also hope to talk about some other things, including Super Smash Bros. Ultimate pretty soon, along with a couple other films that are coming out in January. So thanks again. Please check out my Facebook page for more reviews and news related to my channel. And also if you could subscribe, I'd appreciate that as well. Thank you, and y'all have a good day.